I turned 22 on a cold October morning in Cedar Ridge, Colorado, but there wasn't a single birthday wish waiting for me when I walked downstairs. Instead, I found my parents sitting at the dining table with expressions so cold they made the autumn air outside feel warm. My father folded his newspaper without looking at me, while my mother stared at the tiny baby sleeping peacefully in the carrier beside my feet as though she were the reason every dream they'd ever had fallen apart. My daughter, Gemma, had just turned 3 months old, blissfully unaware that her entire world was about to change. "We've talked about this enough, Ethan," my father finally said, his voice flat and exhausted. "You're 22 years old. You dropped out of college, you're working 2 jobs that barely pay the bills, and you're raising a baby whose mother disappeared before she was even born. This house isn't going to become a shelter for your mistakes." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dad, I'm not asking you to raise Emma. I'm asking for a little more time. I'm saving every paycheck I can." My mother shook her head before I could finish. "Every time we look at that baby, we're reminded of how you threw your future away." Her words hit harder than I expected because Emma wasn't a mistake to me. She was the only reason I got out of bed every morning. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so I wouldn't wake her. "She's your granddaughter." My mother didn't even glance at the carrier. "She's your responsibility." Silence filled the room until my father stood, walked to the hallway closet, and returned with my old duffel bag. He placed it on the floor between us like a final verdict. "Pack what belongs to you. By tonight, you need to be gone." My chest tightened so painfully I could barely breathe. "You're kicking us out?" He finally looked me in the eye, and somehow that hurt even more than his silence. "If you're old enough to become a father, you're old enough to survive without us." An hour later I carried one duffel bag over my shoulder, balanced Emma's carrier in one hand, and stepped onto the front porch. My mother never hugged me goodbye. My father never said he loved me. The front door closed behind us with a sound I'll never forget. Rain had started falling, soaking my jacket within seconds as neighbors peeked through their curtains. A man walking his dog slowed just long enough to stare before continuing down the sidewalk. I looked down at Emma as she stretched her tiny fingers toward me in her sleep, completely trusting that I'd protect her from a world that suddenly felt enormous. I kissed her forehead and whispered the only promise I was certain I could keep. "I don't know where we're sleeping tonight, sweetheart. But I swear you'll never spend a single day believing you weren't wanted. Even if I'm the only person you've got, that'll be enough." Then I picked up our bag, adjusted the carrier against my chest, and walked into the rain without looking back, believing I'd already lost everything that mattered, never imagining that the woman who had vanished from our lives would one day return in a convoy that would bring my entire family to their knees. The first week after my parents threw us out felt like a lifetime compressed into 7 endless days. Every morning I woke before sunrise in the backseat of my old Honda Civic, carefully checking that the windows hadn't fogged enough to make Emma too cold during the night. I had folded every blanket I owned beneath her tiny travel bassinet to keep it level across the back seat, while I slept half-curled in the driver's seat with one eye open, terrified someone would break in or that she'd wake up needing a bottle before I could warm one. I parked in different places every night so security guards wouldn't notice a car staying too long, and every morning I'd drive to the 24-hour gym where my old college friend Marcus secretly let me use his guest pass to shower before work. "You'll get through this," he'd tell me while slipping me an extra protein bar or sandwich from the cafe. "Just don't stop believing that." Those words became fuel on the days when hope was running dangerously low. During the day I stocked shelves at a grocery store, and at night I delivered food across Cedar Ridge until nearly midnight, always rushing between jobs to pick Emma up from an elderly widow named Mrs. Evelyn Carter, who charged me almost nothing because, as she liked to say, a little girl deserves someone rooting for her. Some evenings I'd arrive to find Emma asleep in Mrs. Carter's rocking chair while the old woman quietly knitted tiny sweaters she'd made from leftover yarn. "She's got your eyes," she'd whisper with a smile. "And she smiles every time someone says your name." Those moments nearly broke me because they reminded me I couldn't afford to fall apart. Every dollar I earned went into diapers, formula, gas, and the cheap motel room I rented whenever Emma developed even the slightest cough because I couldn't bear letting her spend another night inside the car. I stopped buying coffee, stopped eating lunch most days, and learned how to stretch one rotisserie chicken into 4 dinners. Late at night, after Emma finally drifted to sleep, I'd open a small spiral notebook I'd carried since college and write letters she'd hopefully read years later. Today you laughed for the first time when I sneezed, I wrote one evening beneath the dim light of a gas station parking lot. You have no idea how much I needed that laugh today. On the hardest nights I found myself thinking about Olivia, the woman I'd once planned to marry, the woman who had disappeared just weeks before Emma was born. Everyone assumed she'd abandoned us because she didn't want responsibility, and after months of unanswered calls, disconnected numbers, and returned letters, I'd forced myself to believe it too. Still, every birthday candle, every late-night feeding, every tiny milestone carried a quiet ache because Emma deserved answers I couldn't give her. Then one freezing November afternoon, while I was unloading boxes behind the grocery store, my phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown email address. I almost ignored it until I noticed the subject line. It contained only 2 words, "For Ethan." I opened it absent-mindedly, expecting another scam, but the first sentence stole every breath from my lungs. "If you're reading this, I've finally found you." My hands froze around the phone as the loading icon revealed the sender's name, a name I hadn't seen in over 2 years. Olivia Harper. I must have read Olivia's email 20 times before my mind accepted that it was real. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my phone onto the concrete behind the grocery store. For 2 years, I had convinced myself that the woman I loved had chosen to disappear, leaving me alone to raise our daughter while the entire town whispered that I'd been foolish enough to trust the wrong person. Now her words stared back at me like they belonged to someone else's life. "Ethan, I know you have every reason to hate me, but I never abandoned you or Emma. My father found out I was pregnant before I could tell you everything. He took my phone, canceled my bank accounts, and had me flown to Switzerland the same week you thought I stopped answering. He said if I ever contacted you again, he'd make sure you lost Emma forever by using his lawyers to prove you couldn't support her. I've spent the last 2 years fighting him. The moment I gained control of my own life, I hired investigators to find you. Please, just let me explain." I stood there staring at the screen until my manager called my name from inside the loading dock. The words didn't erase the lonely nights in my car or the tears I cried while Emma slept beside me, but they shattered the story I'd repeated to myself every single day. That evening I picked Emma up from Mrs. Carter's house, trying to smile as she reached for me with a laugh that always made the world feel lighter. Mrs. Carter noticed something was different immediately. "Bad news?" she asked gently. I looked down at Emma before answering. "I don't know if it's bad or good yet. Her mother found us." The old woman's knitting needles stopped moving. "After all this time?" I nodded slowly. "She says she never left us by choice." Mrs. Carter was quiet for a long moment before placing one wrinkled hand on my shoulder. "Sometimes the truth arrives long after the damage is done, son." That night, after Emma finally fell asleep in the motel room I'd managed to afford for the weekend, I opened Olivia's email again. There were dozens of attached documents, passport records, legal filings, court orders, newspaper articles about her billionaire father, Richard Harper, the founder of Harper Global Technologies. Every date matched the week she had suddenly disappeared. There were photographs of her leaving a courthouse with lawyers, records showing she had filed lawsuits against her own father, and one heartbreaking picture of her standing alone outside a hospital clutching a tiny pink baby blanket I'd bought before Emma was born. Tears blurred my vision. She hadn't forgotten us. She had been trapped. Before I could decide whether to reply, another email arrived. This one contained only a single sentence. "I'm already in Colorado, and tomorrow I'm coming to see our daughter." I barely slept. Every possible outcome played through my head. Would Emma cry when she saw a stranger? Would I? Was I supposed to forgive someone who hadn't truly chosen to leave but still hadn't been there for our daughter's first smile, first laugh, or first steps? The next morning I loaded grocery bags into a customer's trunk while Emma sat happily in her stroller beside me, waving at everyone who walked past. Then I heard it. Deep engines echoed through the parking lot. One black SUV rolled in, then another, until 6 identical luxury vehicles formed a slow-moving line directly toward the store. Customers stopped pushing their carts. Employees walked outside. Phones appeared in every direction as security guards straightened nervously. The lead SUV stopped less than 20 feet from where I stood. A chauffeur stepped out and opened the rear passenger door. Every sound around me disappeared as a woman in an elegant cream-colored coat slowly stepped onto the pavement, her eyes searching the crowd until they found mine. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The entire grocery store parking lot seemed to hold its breath as Olivia stood beside the line of black SUVs, her eyes already glistening with tears. She looked different from the 20-year-old woman I'd fallen in love with. There was a quiet confidence in the way she carried herself now, but the moment her gaze drifted from my face to the little girl sitting in the stroller beside me, every ounce of that confidence shattered. Her hand flew to her mouth as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. "Emma," she whispered, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. My daughter looked up curiously at the stranger standing across from us, then smiled the same innocent smile she gave almost everyone. Olivia took one hesitant step forward before stopping herself. "May I?" she asked softly, her voice breaking. I looked down at Emma, then back at the woman whose absence had defined the last 2 years of our lives. Every painful memory fought against the stack of legal documents I'd read the night before. Finally, I nodded once. Olivia slowly knelt in front of the stroller, her expensive coat touching the pavement as she reached out with trembling fingers. Emma stared for a moment before wrapping her tiny hand around Olivia's index finger and laughing. That single laugh broke something inside both of us. Olivia lowered her head, crying openly as she kissed Emma's tiny hand again and again. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I've missed every birthday, every milestone, every bedtime story." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "She took her first steps chasing bubbles in a park," I said quietly. "Her first word wasn't daddy. It was dog." Olivia smiled through tears. "I should have been there." Before I could answer, a distinguished man in a navy suit approached from another SUV. "Mr. Carter," he said respectfully, extending his hand. "My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm Miss Harper's attorney. We've spent nearly 18 months locating you. Everything Miss Harper told you is documented. Her father illegally isolated her and spent millions preventing any contact. 3 months ago she won complete control of her inheritance and every company previously held in trust." I looked toward Olivia, confused. "Inheritance?" Daniel nodded. "Harper Global Technologies, Harper Logistics, and the Harper Family Foundation now belong to her. She became one of the youngest CEOs in the country 6 weeks ago." Murmurs swept through the growing crowd. Employees whispered to one another while customers continued recording with their phones. Olivia stood, wiping her tears. "None of that matters to me, Ethan," she said, looking directly into my eyes. "I'd trade every dollar I have if it meant getting back the 2 years I lost with you and Emma." Before I could respond, another black SUV pulled into the lot. This one looked older, more understated. The driver's door opened, and to my complete shock, my father climbed out. My heart nearly stopped. He looked older than I remembered, his shoulders heavier, his expression uncertain. He walked slowly toward us, stopping several feet away. "I didn't know she'd be here," he admitted quietly. "I came because Marcus called me this morning." He glanced at Emma before looking back at me. "Your mother watches videos of her every night from the social media account Mrs. Carter secretly sends us. She cries herself to sleep, Ethan." I stared at him in disbelief. "You threw us out." He lowered his head. "And it's the greatest mistake I've ever made." Before I could process his words, more cars turned into the parking lot. My mother stepped out of one of them, clutching a small pink teddy bear to her chest, tears already streaming down her face as she spotted the granddaughter she'd only seen through photographs. My mother didn't run toward us. She walked slowly, almost as if she believed getting too close would make us disappear. The pink teddy bear trembled in her hands as she stopped a few feet from Emma's stroller, unable to hold back her tears any longer. "She's beautiful," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of regret. Emma looked at the unfamiliar woman for a moment before reaching toward the teddy bear with a delighted giggle, completely unaware of the history standing in front of her. My mother carefully handed it over, and Emma hugged it tightly against her chest. That simple gesture shattered whatever pride my parents still had left. My father stepped beside her, his eyes fixed on the granddaughter he had once turned away without ever giving her a chance. "Ethan," he said quietly, "I spent 2 years convincing myself I did the right thing. I told myself that forcing you out would make you stronger. But every birthday, every holiday, every empty chair at this table reminded us that we didn't lose a son because you became a father. We lost him because we stopped acting like parents." The parking lot had fallen completely silent. Even the people filming seemed to understand they were witnessing something far bigger than a viral moment. I looked at the faces around me, my parents standing there with tears in their eyes, Olivia beside Emma with one hand resting gently on the stroller, the convoy of black SUVs lined up behind us, and Mrs. Carter arriving unexpectedly with Marcus after hearing what was happening. Mrs. Carter smiled through watery eyes and whispered, "Looks like your family finally found their way home." Olivia stepped closer and slipped a folded envelope into my hand. "Before we do anything else," she said softly, "I need you to know this was never about proving anyone wrong." I opened it and found the deed to a beautiful 2-story home overlooking Cedar Ridge Lake. Beneath it was another document establishing the Emma Carter Family Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping young single parents with emergency housing, childcare, job placement, and legal assistance. Olivia smiled as she watched me read. "I named it after the 2 people who taught me what unconditional love really looks like," she said, glancing at Emma and then at Mrs. Carter. "No mother or father should ever have to choose between keeping a roof over their child's head and staying together." I couldn't speak. 2 years earlier I had been counting loose change just to buy formula. Now the pain that nearly destroyed us had become the reason hundreds of struggling parents would receive the help we never had. My father slowly walked over to Mrs. Carter and, with tears in his eyes, extended his hand. "Thank you," he said. "You loved my granddaughter when I didn't have the courage to." Mrs. Carter simply smiled. "Children don't need perfect families," she replied. "They just need people who refuse to give up on them." Months later, the Emma Carter Family Foundation opened its doors in downtown Cedar Ridge. Families filled the bright halls, children laughed in the playroom, and young parents attended classes that gave them the second chance they deserved. Olivia and I never tried to erase the past because some scars exist to remind us how far we've come. My parents slowly earned their place back in our lives not through words, but through years of showing up. Every Sunday my father pushed Emma on the park swings while my mother baked cookies with her in the kitchen, creating memories they once believed they'd never have. Sometimes I still think about the rainy afternoon when I walked away from my childhood home carrying one duffel bag and a 3-month-old baby, believing the world had closed every door on us. Looking back now, I realize something far more important. The people who abandoned me didn't define my future. The little girl sleeping peacefully in my arms did. And in the end, the family that once sent me away wasn't remembered for the day they rejected me, it was remembered for finding the courage to change before love became another thing they had lost forever.